Hey there, and happy Wednesday. We are halfway through the month of April, and as I think most of the world knows, this is Autism Awareness Month. And in this month, my solution to really feeling like our voices weren't being heard, that we weren't part of the conversation, or that we weren't leading the conversations. I started the Shine a Light Autistic Advocate campaign last year to shine a light on amazing advocates all around the globe who are doing incredible work. And this year's topic is accessibility. So I'm a burnout restoration strategist. I am a late identified autistic ADHD human. I'm also dyslexic. I have dyscalculia. I have POTS and MCAS, and I'm a whole host of a neurodistinct brain and body, because it isn't just our brains that are neurodistinct, it is also our bodies that are neurodistinct. And when we're talking about accessibility, one of the biggest things, and this is my jam, this is what I talk about as I'm entering year 4 of being burnout, shutdown, and meltdown free for the first time in 40 years. My first burnout began at the age of 6, and I've been on the chronic cycle burnout loop until the last 4 years. And that has been a tremendous thing. I didn't even know that this was possible. I didn't know it would be possible for me. And what's been amazing is that I have found that it is also possible for other people. My clients in the Unveiling method are sharing their successes and their burnout restoration journey every day. And as we're talking about accessibility, one of the most important things is when we talk about burnout, we talk about the impact accessibility has on our burnout, if we're in it, if we stay in it, and how we're able to get out of it. And accessibility is a huge part of that, because if we stop for a second and we think about how often throughout our day we are fighting and we're negotiating and navigating the workplace, the grocery store, all of these public spaces, healthcare. Last night at 11:54, I finally filed my taxes here in the United States. That took hours and the weeks leading up to it and the executive function to make sure I've got all the parts and pieces. And that has got to be one of the most inaccessible processes I've ever done. And it is something that normally I do have an accountant for. This year, it just did not work out that way. And believe me, I was feeling every second of those accessibility challenges last night. So we're going to dive in and talk about accessibility and how that impacts our burnout and our burnout restoration. I'm so excited that you're here with me today. Let's get started.
Hi, I'm Carol Jean, late identified autistic ADHD human, and your host of the Mind Your Autistic Brain talk show and Burnout Restoration UnVeilers community. You're about to experience the new way to thrive as a neurodistinct brain and body by getting off the chronic cycle burnout loop for good. By unveiling your authentic self, defining what thriving feels like for you, knowing your burnout signpost, so those top 20 burnout warning signs are a thing of the past, and stepping into your best life as the creator and leader you are meant to be. Get ready, because this is where we go against the mainstream, say no to outdated self-care tips, and we say yes to who we are in order to create an energized, authentic, peaceful, and harmonized world. Welcome to Mind Your Autistic Brain.
So as we're starting this conversation, let's talk about, well, what is burnout? In the essence, like the simplified, boiled down version of what is burnout. My definition is this: burnout is the consistent unmet needs in our life. And when we're talking about burnout, I talk about burnout from minds of all kinds, because what I've discovered is the unveiling method doesn't just apply to our neurodistinct brains and bodies, but it actually is really helping a lot of other neurotypes, be that, neuromajority types, because they're finding that the things that are out there around burnout, and no one talks about burnout restoration, in this way. And that's one of the things that's really important to me. And it's what I've discovered in all of my work and research in the last 9 years. When we're looking at the brain and we're looking at the body, we all have needs. We all have a sensory system. No matter our neurotype, we all have a sensory system. Now, the differences in the degrees in which we process and take in sensory information is going to be different. So our beautiful, wonderfully wired neurodistinct brains have all of these amazing synapses and connections. And when we're born, we all have just tons of these things, all of these little connections. And they talk about them like arbors, like trees, right? And they've got all these little fingers. And if you've ever looked at the brain, it's really beautiful, and all of the synapses and connections and dendrites and things. So as we're looking at that, when we're born, we've got lots and lots and lots of these. And as we age, as we mature, they start to sort of prune. They fall off. And we have found, and through research, that for our brains, we don't prune as many. We keep a lot of them. That means that there's more information being processed through all of these synapses. And when we're talking about burnout, one of the largest contributing factors to burnout and staying on that chronic cycle burnout loop, and the thing that consumes most of our energy, is our thoughts, our thought energy. If we're talking about just like the amount of energy that's just consumed on the physiological level, it's like 30% of your energy calories every day go towards the energy consumption of your brain processes. Now that's, for those folks that might be blessed with a slower brain, the ones that they say are typical between, 70 and 90,000 thoughts a day. Good for you. I wouldn't know what that's like. My autistic ADHD high-speed brain, I'm more like, you could probably double or triple that. So I'm probably, 180,000, 270,000 thoughts in a day. And that's on an average day. That's not on a day I'm really focusing on something or I really got something happening. So think about the energy being consumed. Think about when you aren't having things that are pouring into you, when you are reaching and facing barriers of accessibility in all of these different aspects of your life, and you're constantly feeling like you're having to over explain, or you're having to jockey position, or constantly try and convince, right? It's like you're always trying to explain to other people why you need something, and it can be exhausting. It's not just mentally exhausting, it's emotionally and physically exhausting. So when we talk about accessibility, we can't have an accessibility conversation, in my opinion, without talking about the impact that accessibility has on burnout. Being in this place of thrive and in restoration going on 4 years, this is something that I didn't know was possible for me to feel sustained energy, for me to be able to feel good almost every day, not every day, all day long, because, that wouldn't be like a normal thing, I don't think. What's normal anyway? But when we're talking about accessibility and we're talking about the amount of energy, think about the energy that you expend every day to simply get your needs met. Now, here's what really blew my mind. Maybe it might blow your mind too. I don't know. We'll talk about it for a second here. So I learned that there's like 30 basic human needs. 30. Most of the time when we think about our needs, you think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is great. But I really love Scott Barry Kaufman's model, the sailboat model of needs. He dives into, and he has a book called Transcend. And it's really wonderful. If you haven't read it, go get it. It is. I love Scott Barry Kaufman, by the way. I just love him as a person. But as a researcher and a scientist, I also just adore this man. So he has a book called Transcend, and he has a sailboat model. And he went back in and he looked at Maslow's work and some of his old journals and things that had not yet been published in a lot of his late in life work. And what he discovered was that Maslow, number one, never created a pyramid. Somebody decided that was the infographic that worked to describe our needs, like our hierarchy of needs. And everything at the bottom are those physiological needs. And that's usually what most people think about. And that's sort of the things that do matter. have I had enough water today? Oh, I woke up really feeling dehydrated. I know, right? Like, holy cow. I got somebody going, whoa, in the emoji comments. When you learn about those. But, oh, I had a headache this morning. I hadn't had enough water the last 2 days. I realized that. I got a new watch and it doesn't go off in the same way my other one did to remind me to drink. Yes, I have to be reminded to drink and eat. You probably do too. So here's your reminder. Have you had any water today yet? I'm working on my coffee, so I'll be doing some water next. But, so we think about these physiological needs first. Like, have I had enough to drink today? Have I eaten today? Have I exercised or moved my body? Do I have, safe and secure housing? Do I have a roof over my head? And when we're talking about accessibility, we're talking about burnout, we really got to talk about the unemployed and underemployed number in the autistic community. In our neurodistinct population, if we throw in, all of the neurotypes together, we probably have more than that. And when it's between 80 and 85%, and just depending on what you look at, to me, that is horrific. That's a human problem. That's a humanity problem. And a lot of that comes down to access. When we're talking about needs and, these 30 different human needs, and I created a needs reflection form as part of the first steps to burnout restoration. It's one of the tools in that first steps to burnout restoration. And I'll be telling you a little bit more about that. And I've got a Shine a Light coupon for you guys this month so that you can start this journey and you can start the process and get the tools that you need. So that first tool is, number one, I'm alexithymic. Are any of you guys alexithymic? Like, this was something I discovered like after my identification and all the stuff. Like, that wasn't something that came out till a couple of years later when I started really processing what does it mean for me to be autistic. And as I started to dive into that and I started to learn more about myself, and I was like, oh, I have an auditory processing delay. I have dyscalculia. I have dyslexia. 2 years ago, it took till 2 years ago, and I will be 49 next month, folks, for somebody to go, oh, by the way, you're dyslexic. And I'm like, wait, what? What do you mean I'm dyslexic? So, when we're talking about these things, we're talking about how is our energy being used? Are our needs being met? What kind of thought expenditure am I having to utilize throughout my day? And when you also may be throwing on other layers of things, like alexithymia, it's like, how do I even identify what my needs are? Because I may not have the vocabulary. I may not have a way to express it. I may not know what my body's feeling like. I can feel all the feelings all at one time, but I may not be able to yet articulate it. And I'm an auditory processor with an auditory processing delay. Yes, I am one of those folks that, I think a lot of us in the community were sort of that, conundrum of both things on either end. So how do we start to do that? And I noticed that as I was working with a lot of my clients, that they were also having a hard time identifying or pinpointing what their needs were. So I created a needs reflection form, and it has the different categories of all the different human needs. So physiological needs, food and water and, our body needs, those things are the ones that most people are like, I don't have any of those things. I gotta start there. And I'm like, no, that's actually not where we start. Let's actually start on the things that make the biggest impact. Because if you're in burnout, you're already running maybe on fumes. Maybe you are running in like the vacuum void of energy and resources. So we got to be really strategic. And that's one of the things that as I approach burnout restoration, I approach it from a very strategic standpoint. I look at it from that 80-20 principle. What is the one thing that we can focus just 20% of our attention on so that we get that 80% ROI, that return on investment? And I call it that return on energy and ROE. How do we get that? How do we get that ROE, right? How do we get that return on our energy? And when we can look at our needs and we look at this list and this tool is wonderful, because it was one of the things that has helped me and has helped hundreds of my clients be able to go, oh, that's actually a need I have. I didn't recognize, like I felt it, but I didn't have a word for it. And having it in a format that goes, oh, this is actually something all humans are experiencing across the board. Then it's like, oh, wow, it's not just me. I'm not alone. Because a lot of this, we can really feel alone. And we may not be able to put words to it, but we feel it and it really drains us or it really hurts us. It wounds our spirit. We don't feel whole sometimes. And that's another thing. You're whole already, my friend. You're whole right now in this moment. You're not broken. You're not defective. You're not a deficit. You're not missing anything. So when we can look at that needs list and we can say, these are the things that are met, because it's way easier for me to look at a list and go, yeah, I got that. It's harder to say, I don't know. Most of it's like, not sure about that. And when we look at this, we have those physiological needs, but we also have love needs. We have esteem needs. We have sexual needs. Hey, folks, we might be in business, but we are also sexual beings. Let's just, even if you're asexual, you still have a need within your own body and sexuality. Maybe it's that you aren't interested in sexual engagement, but we've got to be able to look at these different things about ourselves. And that wonderful tool for the needs reflection form helps you go through these 30 different human needs and check off the boxes of like, oh yeah, this is met in my life, or this is partially met. I've got some of this going on, or I can't check that box. I definitely don't have that happening in my life. And through that form, the inverse of that is it gives you a list of your unmet needs and it gives you a place to start. And here's the thing, you don't tackle all of these at one time. It's about that 80-20 because there's one thing that's going to be the linchpin for you right now in this season. And that's the beautiful thing about this first steps to burnout restoration. As we're looking at these needs and these unmet needs, we're tailoring this to you right now. Are you in a level 1 Poblano spicy pepper burnout? How spicy is your burnout? Are you at a level 1 Poblano? You just got a little bit of maybe just a tiny bit of spicy. Like this is, your executive function, things like that look like this. You may need a couple hours later in the day to recharge. You feel drained, but that might be that level 1 where that's happening a few days throughout the month. The second one is, are you at a level 2? Are you a jalapeno spicy pepper burnout? Are you at a level 3 cayenne pepper? Are you at a level 4 habanero? Or are you maybe at a level 5 ghost pepper, where everything is shutting down? The brain, the emotions, the body, everything. And it's just, you may be also, experiencing some disassociation and disconnection at that point. Anywhere in that level, where are you in your spicy journey? And part of this process in the unveiling method is, let's identify, how spicy are you right now? Are you on the chronic cycle burnout loop? Is this something where, you're doing great on Monday and Tuesday because you recharged all weekend, but by Wednesday and Thursday, you're just like pushing through. Friday, you're just like barely hanging in there, living for the weekend, totally unplugging and just like getting under the weighted blanket and closing the curtains for 2 days just so you can start all over again and you feel better on Monday, but not great, right? And it's just this constant cycle of pushing and pulling back, pushing and pulling back because you're trying to survive. You're trying to maintain your job. There's all of these different elements in that. And so often when we look at that, we're really talking about how accessible is the world for me so that I can get my needs met. We got to know what our needs are, but we also got to talk about the access, the ease of use, so that we can consistently get our needs met. Some of these other elements that we're going to talk about as we move into more conversations around burnout throughout the month and into May, we're going to be talking about, well, what does it look like when a need is met? How does it feel? Right? Like, when's the last time you checked on that one? Here's the other question. I was interviewed this morning by a journalist who is an ally and an advocate in India. Then she is just wonderful. And you guys have got to go check out her work. And I will make sure I share in a post because she did an interview with me this morning around entrepreneurship as a neurodistinct human. And, we were talking about needs. And one of the things she said, what's something that you would tell other entrepreneurs? And I said, I had one of my mentors say to me, Carol Cheen, how can anyone respect your yes if they never hear you say no. Let me say that again. That may have just hit you. How can anyone respect your yes if they never hear you say no? I'll own it. I am a reforming people pleaser. And for a lot of us in late identified life, that's been our survival mode. That's been sort of how we probably end up in burnout, is we've people pleased ourselves literally to death almost. We are doling out and doing all the things because it didn't feel safe to say no. And part of the accessibility is, do I have ease of use? Can I access the things that I need? And it's also, am I saying yes to what I need? And am I saying no to what I don't need or don't want? One of the other tools that's included in the first steps to burnout restoration to help with accessibility. So for me, a lot of the challenge was I knew I had sensory needs and I had fluctuating and different sensory needs. And here's a little insight. Your sensory profile in burnout is different than your sensory profile in Thrive. So one of the tools, the second tool that you get in the first steps to burnout restoration, is a sensory profile reflection form. And I created this for myself, and I created it and tailored it and built it and made it even more extensive as I started to work with more and more clients over the last few years in the unveiling method, because so many of us are experiencing things, or we've experienced it for so long that it's just our normal, right? And we don't recognize that it's a part of our sensory profile. Or maybe we don't recognize that the degree or the level to which we experience one of our sensory challenges in burnout, we might also have it in Thrive Time. It might also be present, but the degree to which we experience it is going to be different. So when we can start to identify all of the things within our sensory profile and not from a deficit level, that was my biggest reason for creating this, is we are by definition, oh my goodness, my dog, her daddy just closed the door and she didn't like that. So when we're talking about our sensory profile, we have to be able to also look at, what is the experience of my sensory profile in the world? Is the space that I'm in my environment, in work, in education, in healthcare, in public spaces, in my own home environment, what are the accessibility barriers or challenges? What are the things that are helping me consistently get my sensory profile needs met? And one of the things, when I went out into the world and started doing research and pulling information, everything that I came across in a sensory profile was from a deficit model. It was telling me I was broken. It was telling me I was wrong. It was telling my sensory system was defective. And that really made me mad, and it really upset me, and it made me feel horrible. And then I realized that, you know what? Not one person that I came across, not one researcher, not one bit of information was coming from someone who is neurodistinct. And I said, okay, this is like everything else when we're talking about accessibility. Everybody's looking at, oh, this is the norm and the definition. And if you don't fall within this, then, you got a problem, not us. Well, that's a barrier. That's a problem. So when I looked at that, I thought, no, I don't want anyone to ever feel like their sensory system is broken, that it's defective, that it doesn't work, because ours worked really, really well. We got all those extra connections that didn't prune themselves. So our sensory system takes in everything, right? And that can be really exhausting and draining. That can be one of the things that, if we aren't able to pinpoint or articulate what that sensory experience is, it makes it really hard to identify where you need to get that need met. So I created this sensory profile that is very affirming. It simply says, hey, by definition, being neurodistinct humans, we are a sensory people. We are a sensory system that's really great. We really pick up on all the stuff. And sometimes it's not so great. My auditory stuff and my tactile things, please don't make scratchy noises. And please don't chew too loud next to me, because then I just want to claw my own face off. But, when we can look at that and go, oh, that's just how my sensory system experiences the world, and it's not broken. And when I'm in burnout, my sensory system can be really extreme. Like I am super sensitive to certain things. And what's interesting is simultaneously, I can also be totally numbed out to something else at the same time. Like I can hear the fish tank bubble in the other room if I've gotten really tired or I've listened a lot during the day. And all I can hear is that stupid thing humming and buzzing. But I can put on my headphones and totally rock out to my favorite song as loud as I want it to be. And it doesn't bother me. You know, that is one of the ways that we experience things. We can, extremely and even kind of numbed out to stuff. That's just part of our sensory experience. And when we can go through a list and go, okay, this is what my sensory profile looks like right now in burnout. And when I know that about myself and I can look at it and go, okay, also these are some of the balance things, because your balance can also change when you're in burnout. Just an interesting little insight there. And so when you can recognize these things, and then you've got this beautiful list from this sensory profile reflection form, you then have two powerful tools to help you start identifying, where do I have a need that's unmet? Where do I have a sensory profile need? What does it look like? What does it sound like? What does it act like? How does it show up? And what is the accessibility barrier that I'm facing with this unmet need? Why is it still unmet? What's the challenge? Where's, in my environment or in my relationships or, whatever that is, what's that barrier? How easy is it for me to access the things that I need to have that need met? There's a lot of need in that conversation right there. How incredible would that be for you to be able to say, oh my gosh, this right now, this is my, how spicy is my burnout from a level 1 to a level 5. I'm, from a poblano to a ghost pepper. And then this is my list of needs that are met. And here's my list of unmet needs based on these 30 things. And this is the one place that, I feel like this really is my 20%. This is the thing that's going to give me that return on energy investment. And I can layer in my sensory profile. When we look at that, we can start having conversations about, how do I access the things that I need so that I can get out of burnout, so that I can be supported. Danny says, I'm in burnout and experiencing balance issues for the past 4 months. Yeah, it is very common. And one of the things that happens a lot, and I thought this was just me, but over the last couple of years, I have found a large majority of people in burnout also experience this. Let me know in the chat. I would love to hear, do you have trouble reading? All of a sudden, you cannot read like you used to read. Like I would have to listen to books. My eye teaming and tracking would get off when my burnout would get really bad. I wouldn't be able to read, and it scared me. Like when you talk about losing skills and abilities in burnout, that was one of them. For me, was like I wasn't able to read. And when I got into restoration, not only did my eye teaming things, my balance started to come back, but I was able to read again. And I also started writing again, which was a really big deal because I'd lost that skill and ability back in my 20s. So as we're talking about these things, how do we access what we need? So when we're talking about accessibility, we really are talking about how it impacts burnout. And when we're doing that, then the conversation is, well, where are the biggest barriers for our needs? If we have, these basic 30 human needs, where's the biggest barrier? And I think sometimes the biggest barrier is the financial one. If we have such a tremendously large underemployed and unemployed population, financial security and stability is one of the biggest accessibility issues we face. And if we look at this, number one, it's the barriers to accessibility to access employment, period. From the front door, from, a job application to reading what jobs are available, being able to go in and perform a job. Let's just say you get over that first barrier and you get a job and then you're in the job. How many people end up quitting because of burnout? I know I did on multiple occasions over my lifetime. Is that something you've experienced? These are things that we really have to talk about this, because we're talking about human issues, global human issues, human rights issues. I think we all should be able to have access to financial stability. Yet globally, we don't. Access to be able to perform and work in your zone of genius and do things that you love that spark joy, that you're giving and receiving, that there's reciprocity. You know, and when we're talking about work, honestly, let's get real granular for a minute. There's not a lot of reciprocity in a lot of employment. There's a lot of giving from us, from employees. There's a lot of taking from the industry. There's not a lot of reciprocity in return. You know, the bare minimum of paying someone, that's not enough. You might think it is. And, you know, I'd probably have a lot of business people argue the point that, you know, hey, you show up, I pay you to do a job and we're good. That's reciprocity. I'm like, no, that's, let's look at the basic human needs. That's not reciprocity. That's a contributing factor to burnout. That's an accessibility issue to financial stability. Let's talk about healthcare. You know, so many of us in our neurodivergent population also have co-occurring health conditions because it's not just our brain that's neurodistinct, it's our bodies that are neurodistinct. And that comes with a lot of physiological differences in health challenges. How accessible is our healthcare? Globally, it's pretty rotten, honestly. It's pretty rotten. I think there's a lot of room for improvement. And tomorrow we have our panel with our phenomenal advocates, including Dr. Bex Canner, Mason Milne, who is an advocate in the Crohn's space, and he is just wonderful. I just love Mason. Dr. Bex Canner is phenomenal. They are a physician, have been practicing for the last 30 years, and are a health equity advocate. And then we have Janelle Johnson, who is a licensed marriage and family counselor. She is fantastic. I absolutely love Janelle, and she is a powerhouse of an advocate. And she also talks about diversity, equity, inclusion. She talks about family. What is it to be neurodistinct and be a person of color? And is just, oh my goodness, this conversation tomorrow is going to be so good, and I cannot wait. And Brian Bird, who was our award recipient last year for the Shine a Light Award for his service to others in the advocacy space. He is the creator and founder of Autism Support Community. Brian Bird will be joining us tomorrow at the end of the panel, because we will be presenting this year's 2023 Shine a Light Autistic Advocate Campaign Award to our next recipient, to our next advocate for their service to others. So please join me tomorrow. I believe we kick off at 11 a.m. Eastern time. Just double check. I will have a post that will be out. Make sure you go check out the Brain Dump blog. Dr. Bex Canner had their article yesterday published around health equities and inequities. So let's start the conversation. I want you to go out and start this conversation. Start it with yourself. Start looking at, what are my needs? What are the accessibility barriers? What is my sensory profile? How is burnout and accessibility correlating? And where are the barriers? Where are the various ways that I can start conversations so that we can start eliminating these barriers? I would like to be able to offer you something really beautiful today. And I have $100 off for the month of April for the Shine a Light campaign, so that you can begin your first steps to burnout restoration. And the link is down in the show notes for this episode right here. And here's a little bit more information about that, so that you can maybe learn a little bit more about what it takes to start that burnout restoration journey, because you're not alone. You don't have to do it alone. I did it alone for the first 5 years, and it was exhausting. And I created the unveiling method because that is what I found got me out of burnout. And through the revisions and through all of the sharing and teaching and training that I've done over the last several years in research, it has developed so that it includes so many different avenues, so that it meets you where you are in your journey. Thanks so much for being here today. See you tomorrow at our Shine a Light Autistic panel for accessibility in healthcare. Burnout. Burnout is when our needs and sensory profile needs go consistently unmet. This is usually where the resources, help, encouragement, and support disappear for us, and we're left wading through social media feeds or Google searching for assistance, only to compound our exhaustion and overwhelm, and still not finding the strategies we need from someone who has a framework and also has a neurodistinct brain and body to guide us into burnout restoration. Well, not anymore. Hi, I'm Carol Jean. I'm a late identified autistic ADHD dyslexic adult, and I am in year 3+ of living burnout, shutdown, and meltdown free after 40 years on the chronic cycle burnout loop. I didn't even know this place of thrive and mental clarity and sustainable energy was possible. You didn't get into burnout overnight, and you won't get out of it overnight either. I wish I could wave my magic wand and make that happen. This isn't a quick fix. This process does take your commitment, but you aren't alone, and you don't have to figure it out all by yourself. You're already light years ahead of where I started over 9 years ago, when I was all alone and white knuckling through every step, trying to figure it out all on my own because there wasn't any help or anyone to reach out to at that time. My solo journey to burnout restoration gave birth to the UnVeiling method. I went from masking at what I call the professional level of camouflaging and decades of living on the chronic cycle burnout loop to thriving and no longer falling back into that burnout restoration illusion trap. I discovered the path and strategies no one ever told me to living life as my wonderfully wired self and a way to flourish in a world that isn't always geared towards our indie brains and sensory profile needs. The UnVeiling method, Burnout to Thriving Journey, is here to help you get off the chronic cycle burnout loop too, and do it in your authentic and unique way, with your sensory profile needs being met and unveiling the thriving best you. No one has the same exact needs and sensory profile, and those both fluctuate and change depending on many factors. But when you have the tools to identify what needs are going unmet and what sensory profile needs are presenting at the moment, you have two powerful tools that make a huge difference in your burnout restoration journey. The UnVeiling method, Burnout to Thriving, is a 4-phase journey. And in this first step, you have access to those two powerful tools that help you identify your unique and authentic needs and those unmet needs right now, along with your individual sensory profile. Your sensory profile is different when you are in burnout versus when you are in your thrive. Knowing what needs are going unmet and having a clear and defined list that allows you to see the areas of need you may have been feeling for decades, but weren't able to pinpoint in this first step to restoration. You know, indie burnout is really complex. It's different than a neuromajority burnout. Begin your burnout restoration today with help, resources, and encouragement in those first two huge and key elements with tools to help break that down so that you have a clear list of your unmet needs right now and your unique sensory profile needs to begin your burnout restoration. This self-paced course of the UnVeiling method will provide you with these two tools to assess your unique list of unmet needs and your current sensory profile so that you can begin putting supports in place to get your needs and sensory profile needs met. Because remember, that's the key. Those inconsistent unmet needs and sensory profile needs lead to burnout. This will also help you have a clear and easy way to share your needs with those you're in relationship with. Being able to share what you need. Be able to identify and pinpoint your needs and sensory profile needs through these unique UnVeiling method tools that will help you throughout your burnout restoration journey. This isn't a one-time thing. You can use these forever. The needs reflection and sensory profile reflection tools allow you to see areas of your life you may have felt for years, but not been able to identify, or areas of need you didn't even know were part of your human need list. There's 30 of them, by the way. This is a powerful two-element approach that will change the way you see yourself and how you view your needs and sensory profile. You have needs. You have a right to have your needs met. Your needs are not too much. You don't have to earn rest or support. They are your right. You are already worthy of having your needs met. Get these two powerful tools to burnout restoration in this self-paced course, along with insights, coaching videos, audio versions for listening on the go, the needs reflection tool, the sensory profile reflection tool, and a bonus tool to help you begin implementing support for your needs with my powerful Get Out of the Thinking Traps tool. So you can unveil those thinking traps that make asking for help and setting those healthy boundaries harder than they ever need to be. This self-paced First Steps course to burnout restoration includes 2 bonus tools and modules. Bonus 1 is Get Out of the Thinking Traps. Bonus 2 is Self-Care Actions for Indie Humans. Sign up today, and during the month of April, all the way through April 30th, you will get $100 off this self-paced course. Go to the link in the show notes below, get signed up, and get started on your burnout restoration today. You don't have to wait. I look forward to seeing you in the course. And hey, be sure to check out the UnVeilers community. Once you become a member of the First Steps to Burnout Restoration, you get access to the UnVeilers community support group as well. And there is a wonderful 30-day access pass in the course for you there. So this is Power Pack full of the tools to help you get started on burnout restoration today. Come join me, get that Shine a Light $100 discount right now.